All right, for more on this, let's bring in Will Stewart. He's a senior vice president with Enterprise Canada, a public affairs firm, and the former chief of staff to former Harper cabinet member John Baird. Will, how should the feds and the Ford government react to Donald Trump's economic force comments?
Yeah, well, I think we've seen a little bit of it today, Matt. You know, a little bit of dismissiveness, a reminder that we are a sovereign nation. You know, Donald Trump, it's almost as if he doesn't understand how tariffs work. Anything that comes from Canada that goes into the U.S. is going to be 20% more expensive for American consumers. And I don't think that the people who voted for Donald Trump wanted to see their costs go up by 20%.
What about this assertion that America doesn't need Canadian cars, lumber, or dairy? Most Canadians know that's not true, but what about Americans?
Yeah, it's 100% not true. You know, Americans think that Ford and General Motors and Chrysler and Stellantis are all American companies, which they are. But a lot of that work is done on this side of the border. Never mind suppliers like Magna in Aurora, Ontario here. Ontario is a car manufacturing jurisdiction, and those cars go back and forth. Those parts go back and forth across the border. And if Donald Trump puts a 20% tariff on it, then of course that makes those cars 20% more expensive in the United States. And people are buying those cars. If people weren't buying those cars, they wouldn't be shipped to the U.S. So Donald Trump's essentially taking away consumer choice, or the choice is buy a different type of car or pay 20% more for the same car that you would have before when Joe Biden was president. And that's going to be a difficult message for Donald Trump to send, I think.
Why do you think Doug Ford has taken up such a leadership role in pushing back against Trump? You know, we're hearing he's going to be on TV again tonight on Fox News pushing his case.
Yeah, and it's good to see, right? Of course, Ford has taken up the mantle as the chair of the Confederation of Premiers here in Canada. He is the leader. It's his turn to be the leader of it. Having said that, he's out there being Captain Canada right now. He seems to have the mandate to wear the flag and the big C on the chest as the superhero for Canada. The federal government is nowhere to be seen. You know, you mentioned, is this going to be a consumer discussion or a political discussion? At the end of the day, it's consumers that are going to be hurt by this. And that's why Ford is taking to the consumer airwaves. It's great to see. I know Vic Fedeli is championing the cause down in Las Vegas at the Consumer Electronics Show. And that's what the Ford government is doing, helped by the Smith government as well in Alberta.
Will this strategy work? Can the premiers be effective in countering this tariff threat without Ottawa's support?
Yeah, it's very hard, Matt. You're absolutely right. This is why we have a federal government. We have a federal government to deal with trade. We have a federal government to deal with border security. And the federal government in this instance has abdicated that responsibility, both before the election, right after the election, and certainly now with the prorogation of Parliament. The House of Commons and the Senate is not going to sit now for a number of weeks. We are in a very crucial point in time. We need all of Canada active in this, and the federal government, unfortunately, has been largely absent.
Do Doug Ford's efforts continue once the chaos in Ottawa goes away? Let's say we have a Prime Minister Poilievre in Ottawa. Does Ford keep up this strategy? What do you think he'll do?
I think so. As I said before, Ontario's a manufacturing jurisdiction, auto manufacturing most notably, but lots of other manufacturing as well. And, you know, we make those goods that Americans want, and they go across the border and Americans purchase them. And that's why there is a trade deficit. It's not as if, you know, Donald Trump is writing a $200 billion check to Canada. That's just not how tariffs work. So, you know, I think Ford will continue to push on this even after there's a change in government, or perhaps if the Liberals decide to take a different tack once they have a new leader, because of the manufacturing in Ontario. I mean, Ontario has trade offices in multiple jurisdictions in the United States, like Chicago and New York, and I think that will continue. I think there's a huge role for Ontario to play in the economy of the United States.
Will, last question for you, and perhaps the most important. We've heard so much about the Ford government calling an election this spring, rumors, things that we've heard through the grapevine. A lot's changed. Do you think there's still a chance he's going to call an election, especially when he's telling people we need to stay focused on the Donald Trump threat?
Yeah, and that's exactly it, Matt. I mean, I think there was a discussion from September of last year until over the holiday break that perhaps it was time to go to an election early, given the threat of Donald Trump in the United States. That window has been significantly truncated by the moves of Justin Trudeau and the Liberals in Ottawa. You've got a situation now where Doug Ford essentially has to call an election before the end of January if he wants to have one, or he loses his window until the fall. So that's really the decision that he has to grapple with at this point. My gut says it's going to be difficult to go when he's made comments just yesterday that we need to be politically united and politically stable to deal with the threat of Donald Trump.
All right, that's Will Stewart with Enterprise Canada. Will, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here.